Ladies and gents, welcome back. Alberta politics are on the mind of Canadians right now as Alberta steps into the heat of the election in Alberta for the seat of the Premier of Alberta. And to talk about this today, I brought Marty Up North. Marty Up North, hey, welcome to the show, and thanks for joining me to talk about Alberta politics.
Yeah, thanks. Love doing this show. Great intro, and you know what? Just heads up. Luckily, it's cool in the air. There's rain right now. Everybody was praying for that, and you know I'm so glad it's raining. Amen.
Well, let's
Yeah.
get right into that. So first thing on the table is these wildfires. So there's a lot happening there, but a lot of people are asking, should they be campaigning right now in the middle of an emergency when, you know, tens of thousands of people are out of their homes at the moment?
Yeah, I get the official answer at this point is that individuals like in Drayton Valley and some of the more affected communities have made an agreement. The MLAs campaigning have made an agreement locally to sort of suspend their policies, but provincially it's not suspended, nothing announced. So we're still going ahead on the 29th. I mean, by all intents and purposes, the rain helped and the fires are really all pretty much under control and everybody's slowly returning home. So you know, it took about 4 or 5 days away from some very affected communities, but not enough to change the whole the not enough for Alberta elections to cancel the election or delay it.
So there's I did a video earlier this week called The Blame Game, and this is a lot of what's going around with the reason for these forest fires. A lot of people blaming Rachel Notley's government for lack of resources in that industry for mitigating forest fires. We all remember what happened in Fort Mac all those years ago. And well, the other side blaming Danielle Smith for the short time that she's been in government, and obviously her predecessor. What's going on the ground here?
Well, you know, coincidentally, the fires occurred in an area that I'm extremely familiar with. I spent 20 years of my life living in Fox Creek, Drayton Valley, Edson. So it's an area I know well. And I have family there, family that got evacuated. So been in touch with a lot of people. On the ground, the frustration is not with Notley or with Danielle Smith. On the ground, the frustration is with middle level managers, bureaucrats. Like I have friends that are really, really not happy with the way bureaucrats handle this. And I think we've seen that like repeatedly in Alberta and federally, you know, during COVID. I mean, I say this often, like we have senior managers in government that I think, you know, like what do they think that they just earned the position from having been in government for 20 years and it's their corner office job? Like we've been let down by senior bureaucrats constantly, you know. As an example, I mean, I was talking to friends and the whole evacuation, you know, when you think about like the center of the fire was around a town called Drayton Valley, right? And so Drayton Valley is also the center of the oil patch. So it's a town where people have a background in health and safety. They're trained. It's like you, it's tradespeople and like me and engineers, you know, and people with a lot of skills. And the government basically shut it down, like did a hard evacuation and sent everybody outside. And you're sending out people who have trucks, who have water pumps, who have things like that. And when you listen to some of the local town halls in the last few days, they're really, really pissed off at local management. So some of the media tried to make this about Danielle and Rachel and whoever. It's not. It's local management. It's, you know, our institutions are failing us in a sense.
Fair enough. Well, let's take a shift over to the cities. Violence is on the rise. We're having more issues with violence, and this is again after a time where, you know, we had in the past this anti-police rhetoric, and it led to policies. And here we are. We're at a situation now. How is this playing out in the politics of the election here?
Well, that's actually kind of a cornerstone of the Danielle Smith campaign, is that she's going to add more. You know, she's talked about more policing, adding hundreds of police officers. I mean, she's already done something. We saw last week. She basically came to a press conference where Mayor Gondik of Calgary was there, and she almost stepped in saying, "Hey, you know what? I'm taking over, and we're going to do this." In that instance, it was around policing on the C train. So that, for people who don't know, C train is the Calgary Transit. So Calgary has a train, an above ground subway. And after the pandemic and COVID, it became a haven of crime. Like, people are, especially in the cold weather, people are there. Anyways, people were scared to take the train. And Danielle literally, and that's not Danielle's jurisdiction. It is not a federal or provincial jurisdiction, but she kind of stepped in and said, listen, here's Alberta sheriffs, and they're going to supplement the Calgary Transit. And it is a cornerstone of her platform right now, is to improve the security of Albertans. I mean, we had a murder again in Edmonton on Friday. A teacher protecting somebody who came to the school with an intent to do harm. The teacher got killed. One of the students, they're saying that the teacher basically stopped the crime from happening, or further violence with her life. And then over the weekend, the police chief of Edmonton made a plea. He's pleading now with politicians to give him the tools necessary to do his job. And one of the tools he's missing, again, it's not frontline support. The police officers have no problem arresting these guys. The perpetrator in this case had a long history. They'd arrested him like dozens of times. They knew about him for years, but every time he's arrested, the judges, who are too lenient, just let him go. So, and that's the kind of thing that Danielle can affect, right? That's the kind of thing where, despite what the cities have going, Danielle can influence the judiciary and put in laws that do not allow. So some of these things. So one example of one of the things she talked about is releasing these guys with the ankle bracelet, and people are laughing, but it's like, listen, she's offering solutions, and you can't just, we have to put some of this partisanship aside. And when somebody's offering a solution, we have to listen. So I think Danielle's trying to do that brilliantly in this election, is to present solutions.
Is that a federal or a provincial thing where the judges would be able to hold somebody or give them bail in that instance?
Well, in this example, it would be provincial, right? You get pulled over, it might even be a level lower. I mean, if the Edmonton police arrests you for, let's say, I don't know what the crime is, because you have a violent offense, you're going in front of a provincial judge first before you would ever go before a federal judge. So I think, so that's the level. I mean, that actually, that's one of the things, provincially, the courts are a provincial jurisdiction for the most part, right? So yeah.
So one of the things that we keep hearing in the news is a story of Danielle Smith trying to interfere in the public medical system. What is the actual story? Because we get the mainstream media spin. What's the reality in Alberta with this story?
Well, I mean, I've tweeted extensively on this. The reality in Alberta, like when you look at the dollars spent by the government per capita per individual, it's like the second highest in the country. So it's not, the funding is not what's missing. So Alberta spends, whatever it is, $3,000 per person goes to healthcare from the budget. What's really missing and messed up is the delivery. And we have an institution called Alberta Health Services, which is basically a crown corporation that administers the hospitals and things like that. And Danielle wants to reform that and maybe even take a piece of Alberta Health and give it to somebody else. So everybody talks about how Danielle suddenly is going to privatize. It's like, nope. It's similar to, in fact, it's a slight change. It's right now she's only proposing to replace part of Alberta Health's responsibility with another group. It might be another crown corporation or something else, but it's a model very similar to France and to Europe, where the government funds, but the delivery is provided by somebody else. So of course the left are screaming that Danielle is wanting to privatize. No, Albertans are not going to pay for healthcare, out of pocket when they go visit their doctor. They can't. That's in the Canadian, the Canada Health Act does not allow that for most healthcare. I mean, it allows it for things like whatever, dental. But
Mhm.
so Danielle is proposing things that are, again, it's she doesn't want to change the funding. She wants to change the delivery, and the resistance that she's encountering is phenomenal. You know, another example was another example. I mean, I have a friend who's a paramedic, and so when he comes over to my house and he tells me the stories of what it's like to be a paramedic, it's frustrating. You know, as an example, if he picks up somebody who called because they had a drug overdose, and then he drives them to the hospital, he has to stay at the hospital with that patient until it's transferred to somebody else. And sometimes he sits there for 2-3 hours waiting for the transfer. So in the last few months, Danielle already made the government made changes that said, you know, they can transfer, my buddy can transfer his patient to a nurse. He doesn't have to transfer to a doctor. And so it's a slight change, and it has a huge immediate benefit, because now that guy, that driver, can take off and go take on another patient, and you're moving the responsibility instead of a doctor to a nurse. And again, you hear people doing all sorts of mental gymnastics to say how bad that is. I'm like, well, okay, let me ask you a question. What if my son is having an overdose and I drive him to the hospital? Can I transfer him to a nurse? And they go, oh yeah. It's like, oh, so I can transfer him to a nurse, but an ambulance driver can't transfer him to the nurse. Do you see where that doesn't make sense?
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
So Danielle is trying to bring that common sense back, and boy, there's resistance, you know. And another example was that they announced a loosening of the regulations around becoming a bus driver, a school bus driver, because school buses, you know, same thing. They're having a hard time recruiting the right number of school bus drivers. And so here they lowered the standard a little bit, and everybody's screaming like, wow, you know, it's going to be like it's going to be chaos. I'm like, wow, when you put your kid in that bus, you're still putting in the hands of somebody who's better trained than when you give it to a typical soccer mom driving, or myself. So and it's also misunderstanding that it's an entry level requirement that's being changed, not the driving qualification. So they're making it easier to apply to become a bus driver. You're still going to get the training once you're the bus driver. So you're still going to meet a standard. They're lowering the entry standard, but not the qualification to drive. But it's proposed, and the NDP immediately said, you know, if we paid more, we'd attract better drivers. I'm like, again, it's misunderstanding. Well, it's their solution to everything. It's their solution to everything.
Of course. And we touched briefly on the topic of conflict of interest last time when it comes to Rachel Notley trying to get the job as premier, and her husband is the head. Is he the head of the public sector
communication union?
Or he's
a communications person for one of the big unions. Absolutely.
Yeah, and it seems like a bit of a conflict of interest. And we all know that unions, that's their job, is to raise the bar, raise the barrier to entry, so to artificially
very timely topic. So that one, Danielle, the UCP finally filed a complaint with Elections Alberta regarding that, because it's starting to become apparent that the unions are almost campaigning for the NDP. I wouldn't say almost. God, they're campaigning for the NDP, but the challenge. So they're being challenged formally in terms of they're going over the boundary. But what's really at stake is their funding, because there's limits. You know, they're using their funds in a way that contravenes the Election Act, which is interesting, because when I'm getting my names confused. When Rachel first got elected, that was one of her promises, that she was going to change that aspect. You know, God, yeah. But back to your comment, his name is Lou Arab is Rachel Notley's husband, and he's, of course, he's in conflict of interest because, well, we talked about this before. The perception of conflict of interest in the private sector is enough to be a conflict of interest.
Absolutely. If you work for one company and another company, it's not good. It's not going to work out. You
not to be crude, but there's pillow talk, right? They're in the same room, they talk, and then he goes out and of course he can strategize with his union buddies on how to help his wife. It's it's an absolute blatant conflict of interest.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
but
I'd
it
love
doesn't
to
come up very often.
I'd love to talk about this all day with you, Marty, but we're going to have to let this wait for another week, and then we're going to have a million other things to talk about next week as we get closer to the election. So I want to thank you, Marty. Let everybody know, where can they find you?
Oh, usual place, Marty Up North. So you look Marty Up North on Twitter or Marty Up North on YouTube. And I've been slow on YouTube, but hiking season's going to start again. So you'll see a few videos. But yeah, man, yeah, we could have talked more. We never even talked about Trudeau, but we'll keep that for another day.
I've got plenty to talk about him.
I'll just say this to the viewers that are listening. You know, I've said to people, I'm trying to, of course, I'm an Albertan and I have an interest in Ottawa, and I'm trying to, during an election campaign like this, I'm trying to split my time. I said, you know, matter of factly, 80% of my time should be spent on the Alberta election and maybe only 20% looking at what Trudeau's doing. I'm having a hard time turning away from Trudeau right now because watching what's going on in Ottawa we're out of superlatives, right? I mean, it is the dumpster fire. We're past that. I don't know what to call it anymore.
It's like not looking at a train wreck. It's impossible, right? You just
yeah, you got to look at it. I'm looking at the sky. Yeah, I'm staring at the sun, even though it's burning my retinas.
All right. Well, I'll make sure all the links are in the description down below. So check out Marty Up North, and we'll see you next week for sure.
Cheers.